So, without further ado, hello everyone. I'm Anthony. I'm founder at SeedLegals, and let me hand over to our special partner and guest today, Lee. Lee, over to you.
Hi there, everyone, and thanks very much, Anthony, for letting me come on and join in the conversation. It's fantastic. So, hi everyone, I'm Lee Lam. I'm founder of Your Startup Partner, and I work as a startup strategist. So, I work with very early ideation all the way through to exit and acquisition, and I'm always looking at the structure of your business, and particularly this topic is very relevant for me because I'm usually there right at the point where people are pressing that go launch button. And I always think it's an interesting dynamic of when that moment is. So when I was speaking with Anthony a little while ago, we had mutual feelings about some of the topics to cover. So we were like, this is a conversation that needs to be spread with more people. And so here we are.
All right. Well, thank you. So, our topic today is the right product, the right market, and the right message. Now, I think most people know me as kind of the SeedLegals guy, as in the legals guy, but actually product is near and dear to my heart. And really, I'm a product guy. I'm not actually a lawyer. Don't tell anyone. We employ lots of lawyers, but, my product goes back many years when I was actually with Kazaa. And on a good day, there were 2 million installs. And I became obsessed on watching user numbers, and the tiniest little button change you'd make would drive big changes in traffic and behavior. And then I headed up BBC iPlayer, and I was obsessed about product things, mostly about the video working and not breaking the internet and not buffering and so on. And then that morphed into other startups and now SeedLegals. So at SeedLegals, I see lots and lots of founders. And they're often struggling with the same, not just the legal side of things, but the product side. So today we can explore the things related to getting started with your first product launch. Now, one of the things that, most of us are, we're of course, super delighted and obsessed with making a wonderful, perfect product. But the perfect product, you don't know what it is until you've launched it. So you could spend huge amounts of time creating a product only to learn afterwards that no one really wanted that, or that you've built twice the amount of stuff that anyone really wanted, and the half the set of things that they really wanted, you haven't built at all. So in this discussion, we're going to talk about how to learn what your users probably really want before you go and build it. And let me start with an example with SeedLegals itself. So at SeedLegals, we do document automation. No one wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm looking for document automation, but they're looking to solve a particular problem. But creating a shareholders agreement with all the questions and all the automation is very complicated. And when we started, there were hundreds of questions. How did I know? How did we know which things our people, customers looking to do a funding round would really want? Would they want this at all? Maybe their lawyers wouldn't let them use SeedLegals, and we build all this for nothing. So how could we get started by doing less work, less technical development, but give our customers a product? And being legals, we couldn't go, you've got beta quality shareholders agreement. The legals will probably mostly work. There might be some bugs. Obviously, that wasn't going to work. So what we could do is we could do things manually in the background. So we could create the nice web form that has our users enter the deal terms, but then in the background, our legal team would use Microsoft Word and create the document. And when they were saying, so you get a great document checked by a human, that was going to be great, but we had to do it manually. And when our team was screaming, oh my God, Anthony, this is killing us, we need to automate it, then we would know which deal terms people were wanting and that people really wanted to use it. So with that as the intro, let me hand over to Lee for the particular focus of the session. And then Lee, tell us a little bit about, you're an early stage founder coming to you. What are the key problems and what's the guidance that you're going to give?
Yeah, sure. So I think it was hearing the history behind SeedLegals that really spurred this conversation, because I think when I talk to founders, quite a few of them start with the solution rather than the problem. So they know what they want to create, but they haven't done the research to find out, is there a market for it? And so the first key is always, what problem are you trying to solve? Otherwise, you come up with a product that solves something, but not really sure what, and certainly not sure that people really need it. And so I think the SeedLegals Genesis story is really important here, because you saw the need, you saw the solution, but you recognized that, did you really understand the problem that the customers would identify with as well? And I think that is one of the biggest restrictions when people are looking to launch. They are really unclear, and what they're unclear about is, if I put this out on the market, are people going to buy it? Well, by the point of doing that, you should be in a position to be able to test that theory, and that's where these kind of the MVP status really comes into its own. We can talk around whether MVP stands for minimum viable product or valuable product. I tend to lean towards valuable. What you're trying to do is find out if you've got something that sells. And once you've got something that sells, then you can talk about refining it and making it work absolutely the way that you want it to. But as a business, your first point of focus has to be on, do I have something that is commercially valuable and that people spend money on? And I'm guessing that's part of where SeedLegals came in. How long did you go through that process with SeedLegals, and at what stage did you feel, yeah, this is now something I feel I've got a better understanding of the market?
Okay, all right. So, I mean, let's dive into the MVP part, because I think this is, everyone has done the reading, they know about sort of MVP, but the challenge you have is you wake up in the morning and people aren't coming to your product. And does this mean that you're one feature away from it just taking off? If only we added these 3 user requests, it would take off. Or maybe you're just hunting in the wrong part of the woods completely, and there just isn't a need for it, or you're not communicating it. So, the minimum valuable, I always think about it as continually shipping rubbish, in a sense, which is, it's an excuse for a half-baked product. Minimum valuable is, the users might want all of these features, but if you could give just a slice, it's not going to satisfy 100% of people. It might only satisfy 30%, but if that 30% of the right audience, and now you have to find that audience, or they find you, can use a simplified version of your products, that is the essence of, getting something out sooner. So small, but perfectly formed. So,
Yeah.
It's said that if you're not embarrassed by your first release, you've left it too late. You could have released earlier. That's a hard thing to do at the time. It's also said by many founders that, they will get a bad reputation, or people will learn to not want to use their product. And I say to them, there are 60 million people in the country. In the first, period, maybe 100 people will find your product. If they didn't like it and you launched too early, guess what? That's 59.999 million that you have never seen it. So you're much better off learning. And, the other thing is, you're not going to signpost it to look like it's a Series A funded company. People are going to know in an instant that it's early stage. Your website's going to be super early stage. You're going to say just launched. When you talk to your customers, you're going to explain, hey, you're one of our first users. And actually, most people want to be helpful and will be delighted to give feedback, and will actually be quite accommodating. You have to be a bit careful. If you want people to pay for the service, then people will be a lot less accommodating. But if it's free, I've tried many AI products recently where the output is quite variable, but that's okay, or it doesn't integrate properly with Google or whatever it is. I'm okay. I'm delighted to give feedback. I'll stay tuned. So you're going to engage with your customers to get something out quickly and get some more feedback. Now, let's talk about a bit more on that timing. Lee, you've got some thoughts on the perfect time to do that.
Yeah, so I would always go, when you think that you have a perfect product, like you say, you've left it too late. So you're trying to find this perfect, it's not necessarily the perfect product at that point. It's what is the market doing at that time? It's better to launch to a market that is primed and ready for you and that you can learn from, than if you're going to try to, can the market wait for me because we've just got a few more things that we want to do. And I think that's where people can get unstuck, because in their head, they want to go with that perfect product, but that is going to take too long. Looking at the product as well, you may find that there's a natural rhythm to when you should launch. So if you're running an e-commerce site and the majority of your work is going to happen around seasons such as Christmas, you need to launch with enough time, not just before. You definitely want to be well advanced by the autumn even, but you want to know when is the best time, when is my customer base going to be most ready for me, and work before that. We do have this concept of the 7 touch points in marketing, right? Where there is a generally upheld belief, and I've seen it happen this way, that you need around 7 or 8 times of people hearing about you before they even really engage with what you are. So there's no point having that big launch event, because that's one event. That's the first one. You've got another 7 to go before anyone really pays attention. And that takes time. So you have to factor that in. So you have enough touch points before your market is in the right timing frame to really make the most of it. Anything finance related, maybe that is around the tax laws or the tax schedules of your particular area. When are you going to be the most useful, and work backwards, because you have to factor in, people have to get to know about you first. You could be the perfect product, but if you launch right at the last minute, they can't use you. And so understanding how your market is going to be using your product alongside how long it's going to take you to develop to get to that point where you've got something of value. To your point around those early users, they are essentially your beta testers, and they'll tell you a huge amount of information that you can use, so you can get you can get it as well as you can at the right time. It's such a valuable resource. And the days of building in stealth mode are long gone. People can see that you're building, so make them part of the journey. And that also affects the timing, right? If you bring people on with you, they also create the momentum, and you can have essentially the perfect launch because you've primed your audience.
So that's great points. Thank you. Now, I think what often happens are people, those 7 touch points that you mentioned, or 7 times people hear about you. I would have put it as slightly fewer than that. That is super important. I think a common problem people make is they think, I'm going to launch and then suddenly the traffic's going to go like this. But actually, it doesn't happen. And the challenge with that mode of thinking is you wait for perfection, thinking that you can open the doors and they'll all come. But actually, people do have to hear about your product or offering several times, some of it directly from you, some of it from others. If you tell people how wonderful you are, no one's going to believe you. When a customer or someone else that you think is giving a trusted view reports on it, that's good. When 3 people start talking about it, now it's in your mind. And of course, the other thing is many things people don't need right at the moment. So at SeedLegals, if I launch and where it's great, we do funding rounds, they're not everyone in the world going, actually, this morning I'm planning a funding round. No, they're going to go, oh, now there's a better way of doing funding rounds. When I next want to do that in 6 months' time, I need to know where to go. So actually, what you're going to have is your traffic's going to be this gentle building. And now you want this curve to start earlier rather than later. If you've launched your product when this curve starts, you've just spent all this time and wasted all this time essentially building something, and only then are you getting the messaging out. So you want to bring the message, the outbound message, to start as soon as possible, because if you are burning money week on week, how can you start leveraging that sooner? So you can do that with content marketing. You can do it with maybe some freemium piece, maybe something simple that people can try. Maybe there's, if you're trying to work out company valuations, for example, a simple calculator while you build the more complicated one. So you want to start as soon as possible. Now, on the seasonality, there's the positive and there's also the negative. So yes, obviously, if you're doing Christmas drop shipping or something, everything has to come together, not just that the product is there, but you have to have everyone signed up and orders and so on. So you're going to go back months from there. But there's the converse that I see, particularly in France, where there's always a reason to delay doing something. It is August, everyone's away on holiday. Oh, wait, no, it's Christmas, it's holidays. Wait, it's Easter, it's holidays. So for me, you should never procrastinate because your company's burning money all the time. Your competitors are building something. So always try, there has to be a really good reason to not get something out today. And waiting for perfection just means that this curve just starts later and your traffic takes longer to build. All right, so let's switch gears from to actually starting development. So insourcing and outsourcing. So, you would, of course, I think most people would love to have a nice development team, whether they work in an office, these days, or whether they were hybrid or whether they're remote is now a moot point. But of course, unless you've raised a few £100,000, you can't afford to hire a bunch of developers. So perhaps you would outsource. So let's dive into outsourcing, and then let's talk about no code, low code as well. So Lee, over to you on thoughts on when it makes sense to insource, develop with your own team and build a team, and versus outsource. And then I'll give my thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the key things that particularly sort of non-techie founders don't always appreciate is that when you engage with technical staff, a lot of what you need to tell them is instructional. You need to be able to explain to them the whole flow of what you're trying to create. Now, it's not as easy to build something and then go, oh, hold on a second, can you add something from the very beginning? A techie will just look at you and want to throttle you, right? Because they're building an architecture, not just to create the beta, but actually this is scalable. Make sure that it doesn't just hold 10 users, it holds 1,000 or 10,000. And to do that, you have to give them an idea of what the full process looks like. So the very first thing you have to do is know your process. Like from the very beginning to the very end, what are you asking the technology to do and why? Then you can go out and have a look at the technical solutions. When you do that, one of the simplest ways to kind of try before you buy is using third-party products. Like if you're going to have a messaging system, maybe use Slack as an interim measure. Use Asana if you're looking for a workflow. There's so many things now that integrate together. You could actually reflect the process that you want to have, not even developing anything yourself. But the reason you do it is to test the flow. Is it working the way that you want to? And you're slowly building those instructions so that by the time you're talking to your dev, they're much clearer. They know what it is you're trying to deal with, and you are more confident that you're giving the right instructions. The outsourced coding now is phenomenal. They can do a really good job, but only if you give them really good ways of thinking about it initially. And in a lot of cases, what we can see is you give them a 50% finished process, and a dev will look at it and go, I can build that, but I'd much prefer to build this because it's easier or it's quicker or it's cheaper or it's what I think the business should look like. And then slowly but surely the founder loses sight of what it is they're building. So the absolute key is to know what it is you want them to create so that you can make good choices about who to bring on. I've worked with founders who have got halfway through demos of their MVPs and realized that their technical person literally doesn't understand anything about the business process, the vision. They're just following orders. And it's really difficult to get them out of the way to bring in someone more knowledgeable, and it can often slow down things. And from the founder's perspective, it knocks their confidence. They now feel like, well, maybe I don't know what this is. If you're talking to a non-techie founder and a dev says that won't work, you have to be in a good position to say, is it that it can never work, or is it that you can't get it to work? Because we're in the space of innovation, right? We're founding, we're entrepreneurs. We will create things that don't exist right now. And for a lot of dev companies, you have to find the relationship that you can test that innovation and build something more than exists right now. Otherwise, you end up looking like everyone else. And maybe that's not what you envisaged coming out with. Just because the first coder that you speak to says that can't be done, the more you understand what you're trying to do, you just go, no, you're just the wrong person for me. I need to go and find someone else. And you can really negotiate on a much stronger basis.
Okay, so a lot of great points there. So let me dive into a few as I remember them. So the first one is, which actually I think is super important, is are you a technical founder or not? So many times founders are technical, they're coders, they start coding something. The challenge there is they may not know how to market it, and they may not know how to price it, and they may not know how to create a great team, but they can execute it. But there are also a lot of founders, doctor, dialysis machine, something. They've got the vision, cure poverty, whatever it might be. And I'm not sure poverty's curable, those two things. But anyway, so there's a fantastic vision, but how do you execute it? And what I've seen are sometimes the visionary founders or founders who are not technical have a big problem with translating their their vision into something deliverable. So I imagine this island, which is a democracy built on a DAO, and go and build it. And the developers are looking at it, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? What do I build? So if you're not a technical founder, you're definitely at a disadvantage in turning that vision into reality. So how are you going to, bridge that? Well, to find, firstly, if you can find a technical co-founder so that they share the vision, but they can put it in a way that a tech team can build it. What does a tech team need to build it? Well, they need a set of stories and epics and tickets and Jira tickets and so on, or Trello tickets. Let's say there's a button that says follow, and it goes here and it's green. So somewhere between the vision and the here's what to do in the next hour of coding, somebody needs to translate that. So finding that technical person who's going to live and breathe your customer experience is really important. So then that goes to insource or outsource. And I think that personally, I'm a fan of the team lives and breathes the product together, whether they're physically in the office or working from home is now, hybrid, of course. But I'm less of a fan of outsourcing because I think that if you know exactly what you want, okay, great, write a product spec and have someone build it. But if you don't know what you want, then imagine that you're making a dating app. And you've created a dating app and it's got some swipe things and some buttons, and you give it to some people and it's just not performing very well. What is the spec to make it perform better? You have no idea. What you are going to do is you're going to sit with some users, you're going to get your developers to sit with the users, and you're going to watch them use it, and you're going to realize quickly the swiping is too slow or people are clicking in the wrong place. So if your team is interacting with your own end users, you're a much better place to rapidly iterate to get a great product. But imagine you've outsourced it, or you're writing to whoever it is going, please make the button higher and please make the action faster. Every request you send them, they're going to see as a negative. You're changing the specs, it's a chargeable item, as opposed to your tech team going, oh, wow, the thing we've built isn't quite working. We need to go and iterate rapidly. So that's the insourcing and the outsourcing. The next thing is, for me, fake it till you make it. So can you get something to market with the least amount of technical effort? And here, I think one of the interesting things is when you start your business, who is your first technical person? So if you go out and hire a CTO, the problem with the CTO is often they think they're not going to code anymore. Those days are behind them. They're going to build a team, but you don't have money to pay for a team. So early on, if you hire a CTO, they might be wanting to manage people rather than they're a manager rather than a doer. And what you really want is a tech lead. So your first tech hire is going to be the person that's going to code things themselves. And of course, you can work with them to help them understand that they will grow into CTO, or they can even put CTO on their business card, but they really want to be somebody that's building something. But here's an observation that I found, which is if you find somebody that's just out of uni, they're scrappy, they can do it in Ruby, do this, put it together in Airtable, but they will make mistakes. And the mistakes they make will be, number one, they might under-engineer it. It might be held together with gaffer tape so that as soon as too many users arrive, it all falls apart, which might be perfect if you've planned that the first one is a throwaway, or it might turn out to be a disaster because you thought this was your production version and you're constantly putting out fires. But they may also do the opposite, which is over-engineer it. Great, we've got redundant databases in Ireland and in New York. We've got active failover with domain things, and we've got, DDoS attack prevention. It's like, dude, I've got 3 users on a good day. We didn't need to do all of this. So, an experienced person, someone, usually a CTO who's been around and done this, would know instinctively the level of engineering that's needed to get your early version. And the last thing to wrap up before we move to the next subject is, and this is a really important one as a founder that you have in mind, your first version, are you building it to throw it away and make a proper version afterwards? Or is this first version meant to morph into your next one? And if you get it wrong, you'll be forever trying to patch something. So let me explain. So let's say that you're doing this dating app, right? So V1 might just be a Figma mock-up. You've got nothing built. You've made some nice graphics and you're explaining the concept to people. And it's going to connect you with people who've done, in a space near you, something or whatever, like all the dating apps do. And so now you can test the concept, you can test the name, you can have people pretend to click on the buttons, and you'll get a set of feedback. But of course, there's no live data to it. So what can you do beyond that? Well, you can pick some no-code, low-code framework, and you can try and create something there. But now, as you do that, you should be thinking, when I make the real version of it, and I've got tens of thousands of users, will I be expanding on this, or will I just use this to test the concept, and then I'll make a new version built in Java or some heavy-duty framework that will take me much longer, but might be much more resilient. So the knowing upfront whether you plan to sunset the early version or keep going is important, because you may, for example, start hiring Ruby developers or Python developers, which is great for getting something fast, but you may not be able to find enough of those type of developers or scale it or make it work at volume. And that may not be the best long-term choice. Anyway, things to think about. So let's talk quickly about no-code, low-code platforms. The first thing to note is your public website should never be built by your tech team. You should always use a CRM, whether it be Squarespace, Webflow, WordPress. I always joke that everyone hates WordPress and everyone ultimately ends up on WordPress. And I think you start off by doing something like Squarespace, Bubble, whatever. You get a site up and running in 10 minutes, a homepage, but you may soon hit some limitations. And then you might switch to Webflow, where, with some customization, maybe you have to hire somebody. It's a little bit more effort. And then eventually you run into the limitations there. And then you end up on WordPress, which is a pain in the butt, but you can do anything with. But make sure that as a founder, you want to change your website messaging, you want to pivot. If you can just log in and change your message, change the background, come up with new testimonials, whatever it is, without needing your developers, that is important. And when I see companies whose public website has been built by their engineering team, and on a call, we discuss changing the headline message, and they go, I'll need to put a ticket in for them to do this. It's like, dude, you should be able to log in and do this now. So definitely make your public website, based on a CRM. Now, any thoughts, Lee, on no-code, low-code solutions?
Yeah, I think again it's based on the fact that the tech is going to be built on your business vision, and understanding that business vision will change. To your point, you have to be able to reflect it. In the first 12 months, your company is going to look very different from what you thought it was to what it ends up as. And the more you can rely on the tools that are intuitive, that allow you that immediate access, and you tailor along the communication with your customer base to say that this is developing, it's evolving, and bring them on the journey, you can get to a point where at the end of that year, you've got something that is more stable, that is ready to go into the car crash that is WordPress on most times. Because it is the best and the most powerful engine, but it's garbage in, garbage out. You are going to be changing constantly while you figure out your market and that sweet spot of getting it right for your customers. And you need access to that as quick as possible. There's so many tools out there now, whether it's APIs that can plug into places or the whole platform itself. You can explain your business process and the value you want to offer the market with so little touch points from a tech perspective, and that helps you stay in control of that messaging until that point where you're ready to go, right, now I want to have far more control over the tech and I need to start building myself. But it gives a founder a lot more opportunity to explore different avenues without, I can't tell you how many founders have said to me, I would make that change, but my web designer's got my admin password, so I can't. And all of a sudden, they're spending another amount of money for another website because they don't have access to that one. It happens so often. Use the products that allow you to test out your theory, test out your process first, and don't fall foul of somebody else holding the keys to your particular castle.
That's a great point. And actually, I'm surprised at how many times I've seen founders who've had a dispute with their developers and the developers have the keys. So do not let anyone develop, more than like 2 days worth of development without you having the keys for everything. And actually, if you think that, there may be a dispute, if it's outsourced or something, make sure you download all the code yourself. I mean, if you're in GitHub and you've got the keys, it's one thing having the keys, but if the person's now locked you out or changed or deleted the code, so like every week, download all the code. So you never want to have a single point of failure, particularly if it's someone outsourced to a contractor. With your own team, you generally trust your team. But my Bulgarian wife has a very nice saying: the highest form of trust is checking, says Comrade Lenin. And that means that, there should, at SeedLegals, there's no one person who's ever a single point of failure. It's always going to be two people who've got the admin keys for everything. So in case someone, gets hit by a bus or something, nothing comes to an end. And the same thing should happen with you. Now, going back to the storytelling and the messaging, and going back to fake it till you make it, one of the things that I think that you should be doing as a founder is to make your website look like you're much further ahead than you are. So let me explain. So if I go to a website and it says, we're working on something, talk to us to find out more, then I know you haven't built it yet. But if I go to a website and it's got a button saying log in with Google, book a demo, then I know, particularly if it says log in, get started now, then I know that you built it. And the thing is, all your customers realize this as well. So in the stage that you're building something, how can you make your site look like it's much more ready than it really is? So obviously you're not going to mislead users. If they log in, there's nothing to be had. But you might, in terms of validation, if no one is going to click the button to book a call, no one is going to click the button to log in, there's no point building all of this. You want to see if people are going to click the button. So here's an idea, which is when you go to booking.com, they could have said, we have revolutionary technology that matches you with leading hotels in different parts of the world with an insanely clever booking system to secure. They don't do any of that. They just have a text field that says, where do you want to go? And I want a hotel or a flight. So on your website, instead of explaining all the things that you do, try to phrase it as, the customer has arrived at your site, there's a problem to solve, they push a button to solve it. And then, since you haven't built it, can you just have an Airtable database running in the background, and you connect a type form or some simple form sender that uses Zapier to send it to your email, where you use your Airtable to look up something and then you reply by email to the user. So you can validate things and even provide a decent service way before you're ready to fully automate it. And this, I think, even, and by the way, you can do this before you've built it, but even after you've built it, too often I talk to SeedLegals customers looking at their website, and they've raised hundreds of thousands of pounds, they've built stuff, but the website is still looking very much like, we put the site together before we built anything, and we have to update it. So see how you can make your site feel that you're a running service, and put yourself in the point of view of a customer that is looking around. I want to, you do exactly that. Book a demo, sign up now, I'm in. And that's your best validation. All right. So let's talk quickly about legal considerations. So, of course, being the SeedLegals guy, I would say make sure that anyone who ever does any work for you always has a contract. The contract should always have IP assigned to the business. Obviously, when you are Series A backed, this is all standard. That your challenge is where a couple of people meet at the pub and you get started on something and it's kind of a hobby, and you're not going to infuriate the other person with some legal documents. But the problem is, the longer you leave it, the more difficult it becomes. And, the thing about your developer saying they own the keys to your, GitHub repository and not giving it to you and you're screwed, this is because you didn't clarify when they were going to get paid and who owned the IP. And now they're saying they own the IP and they want a rev share or something. So, the legal documents are there to essentially be that awkward conversation about who owns what and who gets paid what, and sometimes in cash and sometimes in equity. But the longer you hold off doing the awkward conversation, the harder it's going to be later on. Okay, so Lee, before I go to our summary of things, any things that you want to hop in with?
I think what can be useful to understand is, I just want to reiterate really the need to bring people with you on the journey. Like when I talk to founders, the perception of what they're creating, that kind of shop window of the website, I think sometimes gets over-engineered because they feel a need to, present themselves in the perfect way, like with a full package. And it really doesn't take very much for someone to do a little bit of digging to find out where you are in the process. And so even when you're developing, build in public is a term and a phrase that we use. And I think sometimes people assume that there's some kind of vulnerability of building in public, that you're saying you're not ready. And actually, no, what you're doing is you're empowering your customer base to tell you what it is they want. One of the reasons things like crowdfunding work so well is because there's a whole bunch of people who already know that you exist before you've built the thing, and they've already paid some money to you because they believe in what you're creating. And so we know that the customer base nowadays doesn't want the big reveal. They don't want the ta-da, here it is. They want to feel part of the process and feel like they're the champions. We talk about the early adopters, the ones who not only are the first ones to find us, but the ones that will amplify our message. they can't find us if you're waiting behind a bit of code or a button that doesn't quite work the way that you want. You need to be out there talking to people. So I just want to reiterate that, because there's this trifecta of reasons founders give me for not wanting to press go, and that's the product's not ready, it's the wrong time, or I don't really know who I'm selling to. Find out who you're selling to first, and the other two will naturally fall out of those conversations. I think all of the tools that we've talked about, the no code, using devs, using your own team, all help you create something that's special. But always allow your customers to come on the journey with you, because they are going to help get your message out far quicker than any amount of promotion that you can do yourself can ever do.
All right. So I think actually, that you just nailed the key, reason for this discussion are those 3 reasons that founders give you for procrastinating. So go through those again, and then we'll dive in for a moment on them, because if you're a founder watching this going, yes, that's exactly why I'm not launching. Well, let's see how we can help you launch sooner. And then I'm going to talk about storytelling for a moment.
Yeah, no worries. So there is essentially 3 things that I get told, and I see it with the clients that I work with. The first is the product's not ready. Normally that's because they're looking for perfect and they don't know what perfect looks like, because the second one is they don't know who they're really selling to. So without that feedback loop already established, you're trying to create in this vacuum of not enough information about what it is that the market is after. You creating a business it's not a hobby. It is, I've recognized that there is a problem with the marketplace that I know how to resolve. So you ask the market as early as possible, but then they get themselves tied up because they say, well, I can't go out to people without knowing what I'm selling. It's like, yeah, you can, because you're not selling a product at first. You're saying, hey, I've noticed that this isn't happening properly. I think there's a better way of doing this. Do you agree? And you get people to go, yeah, I see that as a problem. And then you can start building in your head the product. Richard Branson has always said, say yes and then figure it out later. And if you look at a lot of the way that his businesses have been built along the way, it's, do we see a problem? Yes. Do we think there's a solution? Yes. Right. Let's build it. So those 2 things are constantly used as, I can't do one without the other, but I can't start the second one because I haven't done the first one. And so ignore that. Talk to your customers first, because they give you the information. They will also help you figure out the timing. One thing that a lot of founders will do is they'll come up with their idea and they'll go, I need social media. I need social media quickly. Right. And it is a huge part of the founder's journey, of getting that visibility, of getting in front of investors. And I totally understand it. But there is a huge risk with social media. You could go viral. The amount of people who want viral until it happens is huge. And you have to bear in mind that when you go out there, timing is probably out of your hands at that point, because if you happen to hit a rich vein of an argument or a problem that people really latch onto, they want it now. They're like, yes, have you got this now? And some of the clients I've worked with have had that viral moment, and they're like thrust into this moment of product development on the hoof, because they've literally got people going, where do I sign? How do I get involved? And all of these things can paralyze a founder and think, I can't launch, I can't do anything. But if you have an answer for each of them, if you know that one's going to feed the other, then you can maximize those moments, and you can make the most of that visibility, whilst encouraging that storytelling, that we're on a journey together, guys, because it's not quite ready, but we're going to build it so that when you press that button, you get what you want from it. And so rather than using them as this perfect triangle of blockers, actually they facilitate one another. And from our previous conversations, we were both kind of having this conversation going, yes, exactly, just get it out there and figure it out as you go along, because that's the that's the fun part of entrepreneurship, the building and seeing it come to life.
All right, great points. And I think the worry is that, of course, all these people will come to your website and have a bad time. The reality is that two people will come to your website, and you could have done more to, provide something to them. So just before we wrap up and turn to questions, the art of storytelling. And so here's what I usually find. I'm talking to a founder and they're passionately telling me, here's a particular use case. There are 10 million people in the UK where banks won't give them a bank account. The unbanked, it's because they don't have the right credit history or they are still students and it's a disaster. They can't get a loan, whatever it might be. And you're really bought into the proposition. And then you go to their website and the website says, AI and blockchain, ledger technology solutions for the unbanked. And you go, there's a complete mismatch between the student looking for something and this generic, bland messaging. So one of the key problems I see is the difference between the founders expressing beautifully and passionately the problem they're solving and the website, which just says stuff. So your website should explain the problem that people have. And in the case of SeedLegals, when we started, it said we do document automation and contract generation. And then I realized 0 people in the world wake up in the morning and going, I'm looking for contract automation. No, they want to do a funding round. So we skipped all of that, replaced it, happy, smiling faces, rocket ships, testimonials, the fastest way to do X and the best way to do Y. And don't bother saying what you do, just explain the problem you solve. And it's a bit like the booking.com, just where you want to go today. So thank you, everyone. I hope this was valuable. Don't go away quite yet. We're going to now jump and read some of the questions. And if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat and let me see right now where we are. So, all right, give me a moment. All right, what are your views on using no-code platforms, says Jamie, like Flutter to build an MVP to keep costs down, and then when you have traction, make a proper coded version. Do you want to take that one first, Lee?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot will depend on the resources. We are in a world at the moment where many investors want to see what you have before they invest. And in many cases, they want you to start generating revenue. So you do have to do things on a budget. So they can be helpful. What I would say is that you have to have a timing in place, have a roadmap, whether that's I'll hold on to this for 12 months or when I hit a particular level of revenue, because it will be built on a fairly generic platform. That's the whole point. It's the skeleton, but it's not going to have all of the engine tools that you're going to want going forward. So have in mind some trigger points of, if I have this many customers or I have this much revenue coming through, or a particular set time, that you test your theory, you test your approach during that time, but knowing that you're going to come away from that and learn what it does well, what you want it to do differently, and definitely try to keep it to a limited amount of time, just so that you can move forward with more purpose. And as I say, for when you're looking for investors want to see it in action. So anything that gets you to that space quickest is worth doing for sure.
Right, great point. So I think, to go back to the early discussion, which is, if you think about, I'm doing this as a throwaway first, this is the building blocks for my, structure, and I'll build upon it later. All right, so the next question is actually, I think, at the heart of everything, which is the problem we're facing is that even though the genesis of the product lies in customers telling us what would be fantastic to have, now that we have it, they seem not so kicked about it. And this is actually a real problem, which is you listen to customers, you build it, and then it turns out it doesn't really work. And I look at this with Twitter, now X. Every single thing they have done has zero uptake other than increasing the number of characters in a tweet. Because the thing is, I think people perceive a product is used for a particular thing, and you bolt on all this extra stuff and no one cares. So, Twitter, the discovery and the buy things you see on television and this, nobody cares. You just want to tweet and see someone else's tweets. And so the problem is, and this is the non-trivial problem, if you listen to what customers are telling you, will that be a good thing or will it be a bad thing? And obviously it's nuanced. My previous startups were more social networks. And one of the things I realized is if you listen to every request from your customer, you would just build another Facebook. But nobody wants another Facebook, so you mustn't do that. And so it's really difficult. And so I started off, being a tech guy for many years, being tremendously frustrated that the to-do list was much longer than your actual ability to ship things. And then I switched modes completely. And I think it's actually liberating to have a huge number of things that you're not doing so that you can focus on the smaller number that you are doing. And so you're going to pick the most valuable things that align with your story and the mission of your product. And then you're going to really have to think about all those requests, are they super necessary or not? And then when I look at our GitHub tickets, I've got tickets that I wrote on SeedLegals like in 2018, and they're still not done. And on the one hand, I'm really annoyed that they're not done. On the other hand, the fact that the product still works and they're not done meant actually, they weren't really that important. They never rose to be the most important things. So to try and work out of the things that people are asking, which of these are your core customers, which things are just things that are nice to have, and which things actually maybe you intentionally didn't want to build because you wanted to force it to be a platform, not a service or whatever it might be. It didn't fit your methodology. But this is really a difficult one because if you listen to each user request, you'll be building more and more things, and you'll be optimizing for a sort of local maxima that maybe miss a much bigger opportunity elsewhere while you're doing all these little things. Hard to know. All right. So next question is, how do you see an MVP if the product will make a big difference in a market, has lots of competing products that can be disrupted? As an MVP, it can't stand out, which is a really great point. Let me take that one first, and then I'll hand over to you, Lee.
Yeah.
So there are actually two parts in that question. Number one, if you have, competitors, should you be doing this at all? You've picked a really hard problem space. I mean, at SeedLegals, I keep thinking, should I get into HR, payroll? But why? There's HiBob, there's Crunch, there's all of the others. I mean, I could provide a much wider service. You can do everything in one platform, but these other propositions exist. So you are, obviously, if nobody ever built a better version of Jira or one of the other messaging things, there'd be no Slack. So it's definitely something you can do, but you may be better off picking a slightly different problem space. But if you are still doing that, then I think I like to call it the shtick. Your product needs a shtick, something that people remember that sticks out. So if you remember Snapchat, now Snap, when it launched, their website was yellow with a ghost on it. And everyone older than like 15 went, I have no idea what you're talking about. And everyone younger than 15 went, this is so awesome, I'm in. So what is the shtick? If you're a dating thing, it's swiping. If you're something else, I don't know. So try and figure out the single thing that is going to be press-worthy, that is going to jump out and get you attention, and people will talk about it. So one of the things I sometimes use for recordings is a software called MMHMM, the most ridiculous name. I mean, you can't tell people go to but it actually got a huge amount of press when it launched because of its silly name. I'm not suggesting that's a good strategy, but the shtick is the thing to go for to whether you're, in a contested competing space or in a unique space. Getting press eyeballs is super difficult. And so find the shtick. Lee, any thoughts?
I guess what springs to mind is okay, so you're in a competitive space. the reason you're joining must be because you spot a gap, right? There would be literally no reason to be there unless you can spot that the current offering doesn't go far enough. Now, you have to lean into that gap, because if you've noticed it, you have to assume that there's a customer base that have also noticed it. If you think of something like Airbnb, they took a really long time to actually make a presence, because they started off saying, we allow you to rent out places, and people went, I don't need that. But when they said, are you fed up that hotels aren't in the locations where you want to stay? They're like, yes, absolutely, yeah. And then your messaging gets through. So kind of combining your 2 points, Anthony, it's that the shtick is look for the rub point. You've noticed a gap. Think of it like, why would this irritate the current customer base? Because people will move through pain far quicker than if you give them something better, right? If you deal with an irritant that they have with the current offering, they are far more likely to go, yeah, this is the solution, than if you try to fight a corner against brands that are much more established, much better brand visibility. We see this in promotion all the time. You don't necessarily need to dig out other competitors, but just spot the gap that's there and say, isn't it a pain that this is here? Wouldn't you prefer something to be able to deal with this? And people naturally find you, because if you've spotted it, they have as well.
All right, great point. So now we've got another great question, which is, what if your product has to be certified as fit for market, so then you can't have an MVP, which is a great point. If you're making a dating app, as MVP is anything. But if you're making a medical device or a skin cream or something like that, maybe it needs certification. And is there a way to skip the queue? So firstly, you can see this in two ways. Number one is, if you can't skip the queue and there's no such thing as an MVP, then in a sense that gives you a natural moat. If it takes 5 years to get FDA or whatever it is approval, there can be a lot fewer companies looking to do that. And so you're going to be one of a smaller number, but you're going to have to find what's called often patient capital, investors to give you potentially millions to wait many years to get there. And that, although it has an upside of the moat, is also incredibly slow and much harder to get funding for. But there is often an MVP. And the MVP means a version of the product that doesn't need that certification. So, for example, I was talking to SeedLegals customer looking to do some medical formulation. But if the concentration is below a certain point, then it can be sold as a cream and doesn't need to be certified. So there may be variants of your product that you can get to market for more limited use cases or smaller the concentrations or whatever it is, that isn't your dream goal, but gets you there fast. Or maybe it can be sold to, qualifying doctors or others. So you skip the certification in this limited case, or it's sandboxed or something. So, if you can't afford the long and expensive road, then which things can you do to rethink it to get there faster? Sometimes you can offer a time and materials business where you are consulting while you're building the app. That has a challenge, which is investors go, great, you've got a great consulting business, but it's not a platform, and you may never get out of that vortex. All right. So I think that's a wrap for us. Lee, where can people find you if they want to find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am constantly on LinkedIn. So, and somehow I have managed to get Lee Lam, which I'm not entirely sure how, probably because I've been on there for nearly 20 years. So please feel free to connect with me on there. My website is yourstartuppartner.com. That talks about both early startups and when I start working with growth companies. And my platform is advisorinyourpocket.com. So that's for very early startups to get, good quality advice at a very early stage. And you will find me in all of those three places.
All right. Thank you. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Anthony Rose. You can reach me on email, anthony@seedlegals.com. For the questions we didn't get to, please drop a LinkedIn message or an email to either Lee or me. We'd be delighted to answer. And this recording will be available for those who missed it, and we'll turn it into a content page. And so thank you everyone for joining. Some nice messages. I hope it was valuable. And I am, personally here to help with not only the legals, but the product side as well. That doesn't scale on one-to-one, hence, sessions like this. Have a great day, everyone. Think about storytelling. Look forward to seeing your product. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.